Ever since my wife, the CEO's Bai Yuguang, returned, she has been coming home later and later. I quietly observed all of this. Simply because I am Chu Yang, a contract husband hired for 50,000 a month. Now that the contract is about to expire, as a diligent and conscientious employee, I naturally have to know when to leave, without causing any more trouble for my boss. So I handed over my work, packed up my personal belongings, and waited for the right moment to grab my luggage and head overseas, planning to take a 6-month trip around the world to relax. But something about how things unfolded felt off. Why was it that the moment I opened my eyes, I had already returned to the country? And the person beside me, someone who looked remarkably similar to Shen Rian, who exactly was she? Why was she smiling at me like that? "Stop, your hand," I murmured softly. She smiled. A sweet fragrance drifted over, accompanied by a mature, gentle voice that made my scalp tingle. "Hubby, are you comfortable? Are you still going to let me live or not?" I stared up at the ceiling and let out a long sigh, gripping the shirt in my hand until it was wrinkled beyond saving. Honestly, it's graduation season, so I can't help being anxious about finding a job. Didn't I just go to a job fair earlier? Guess what the recruiter said? "Sorry, we only hire masters and PhD graduates." I stared at the job posting in disbelief and pointed at it. "But you're only hiring one person to guard the entrance. Do you really need such a high degree?" The recruiter raised an eyebrow and snorted coldly. "Kid, you're too young. There are things you don't understand." I humbly asked, "Then please enlighten me." He clearly enjoyed that. Smirking, he replied, "The gate we're talking about isn't an ordinary gate. It's the security post of a high-end experiential research institute." He pointed with his finger. "This position is extremely popular. The people coming through are all big-shot leaders. So naturally, good looks and high education are both required." I clapped my hands and asked, "Then may I ask what your education level is?" He let out a disdainful chuckle. "Elementary school graduate." I leaned back and examined him carefully. His appearance was average, but his face was full and solid. Square jaw, nose like a hanging gallbladder, wide mouth, high cheekbones. I gave him a thumbs up and exclaimed, "Impressive. There must be an expert backing you. Definitely a brilliant mind with vast knowledge." He looked slightly smug. "Ha ha ha." Then he waved his hand, signaling me to come closer. I looked around like an undercover agent and leaned in. Lowering his voice proudly, he said, "Because my dad is the institute director." I immediately bowed respectfully, then raised my thumb again. Legend. Turning around, I continued submitting resumes. I found a booth with a long line and quietly waited my turn. After a long while, "Hello, ma'am, I think I'm very suitable for this position. This is my resume." I handed it over, but the woman across from me didn't take it. She was busy cracking sunflower seeds. Thinking she hadn't noticed, I called again. "Hello?" Tap, tap. She tapped the recruitment poster with her finger. I looked closely. They were hiring only one person. The requirements were height between 165 centimeters and 166 centimeters. Weight between 200 jin and 201 jin. Must have graduated from Major X, attended middle school X and high school X. Due to the special nature of the position, there are appearance requirements. Details as follows. After reading it, my mouth fell open. I silently looked at her. She spat out a sunflower seed shell and nodded at me with a look full of pity. A face that clearly said, "You get it, right?" All right, I got it. I still refused to believe it. I was a healthy young man in the prime of my youth. Was it really possible that I couldn't find a job? I kept going. I stopped at a booth run by an older man who looked kind. The requirements seemed pretty normal. "Hello, sir. This is my resume." He smiled warmly and took it. As he examined it carefully, hope began to rise in my chest. With his unspoken approval, I launched into a passionate self-introduction. After listening with a smile, he said, "I've reviewed everything. Young man, you're excellent. Exactly the kind of talent we're looking for." "Really?" He nodded kindly. "I'm very moved. I didn't expect to finally meet someone I could talk to properly." I could hardly believe it. Something this normal, was it actually real? I looked at him with anticipation. "So, about the salary, would your company be able to offer 4,000 a month?" That sentence made me extremely excited. In this economy, just finding a job was already good enough. 4,000 was more than acceptable. I nodded repeatedly. He smiled, then reached out his hand. I reached out as well. The atmosphere became tense. Then he began packing up his desk, sighing emotionally. I finally found someone. As he spoke, he pulled out a payment QR code and handed it to me. "Then please pay 1/4 in advance." 12,000. What? I pointed at myself. "Sir, you gave me the wrong code. Didn't you?" Seeing him about to take the code back, I swallowed and let out a long sigh of relief. Then he suddenly slapped his forehead and laughed. "Oh, right, I gave you the wrong one." I knew it. How could that make sense? "This is my personal code. Here's the company one." He handed me another QR code. Seeing me frozen, he casually asked, "What's wrong? WeChat not working? I also have Alipay." My finger trembled as I pointed at the code. "Why'd I have to pay you?" He looked at me like he truly didn't understand. "Well, of course, you're new, you don't know anything. We hire you, don't we have to train you? The time and money spent training you, who do you think pays for that? And if you leave for another company later, who compensates us for all that effort?" He kept rambling on. My head spun. I muttered, "So what you're saying is, even if the company doesn't pay me later, that's reasonable, because you trained me and gave me an opportunity?" The moment I finished speaking, he became visibly excited. "Exactly, kids really are easy to teach. You catch on fast. Get lost." I cursed, turned around immediately, and walked away, ignoring his muttering behind me. So I'm just supposed to be toyed with like an idiot? I refused to believe I couldn't find a job. This time, I approached a guy who looked about my age. He wore a sharp suit and an employee badge. He looked reliable, definitely a big company. "Hello, this is my resume." The sharp-looking guy took it, made a few notes, and casually asked, "Which school?" I froze. It's all written on the resume. But I still want to hear it. "University X." He looked up in surprise. "That's a good school." I smiled. "This one's in the bag." "Oh, it's nothing special," I said modestly. He smiled faintly and continued reading. "Work experience. I once interned at a major corporation." Confidence surged through me. But he frowned and sighed. "Ah, that's a shame. We only hire people with 3 years of work experience." I was stunned. "But your posting says you're hiring fresh graduates." He nodded. "That's right, fresh graduates with 3 years of experience. No conflict there." I couldn't believe it anymore. At the next booth. "Hello, this is my resume." "Not hiring." I looked at the other party. She was a very beautiful girl. "But you haven't even looked at it yet." The girl glanced down at her carefully manicured nails, curled her lips, and told me to look at the recruitment poster. "Female only. Age 18 to 25. Good looks, good figure, good temperament. Monthly salary, 30,000. Room and board included. No office work required. No professional skills required. Only need to provide emotional value to others. Know how to have fun to the fullest. Job content. Accompany the boss on business trips. When necessary, must meet the boss's needs." I had nothing left to say. I quietly stood up and walked out. "All right, I give up." I had taken too many hits today. I needed to go back to the dorm to calm myself down. This was truly an eye-opening experience, though not in any way I wanted. Feeling depressed, I walked toward the exit of the job fair. Hey, you student over there, wait a second. A voice called out from behind me. That couldn't be me, unless you're calling me handsome guy. That handsome guy who's hanging his head right there, wait. I immediately turned around and saw an older woman with an intellectual appearance waving at me. I pointed at myself. She smiled and nodded. After I walked over, she snatched my resume and examined it carefully. She nodded as she read. Very good, very good. Then she put the resume away and smiled at me. Congratulations, you've been hired. Hired already? I looked at her suspiciously. I don't need to pay any onboarding fees, right? She smiled. No need, and you don't need to sacrifice your body either. She paused for a moment, then laughed casually. Of course not. I let out a long breath of relief. Then I'll join. She revealed her fair arm and grabbed my hand. Welcome aboard. Looking back on all of this, I couldn't help sighing again. I did find a job, but I was probably scammed. Looking at the elegant beauty beside me who was flipping through documents, I sighed again. At that time, I had been overjoyed. When I arrived at the company, everything looked very proper. Several office buildings were all theirs, and the employees all looked elite. But once inside, it felt like I'd wandered into a pyramid scheme, or was about to be sold into a telecom scam ring. I was led straight into a reception room. Bang! The woman across from me threw a thick stack of documents onto the table. I was startled. Was this about selling a kidney? Or a cornea? I picked it up and took a look. Well, guess what it was? It was a marriage agreement. The content, a contract marriage with the company's CEO. At that moment, my brain started spinning at high speed. Scenes from all the web novels I'd ever read flashed through my mind. I never imagined, that something like this would actually happen to me. Seeing that I was standing there frozen and silent, the woman across from me softened her tone. If there's anything you're dissatisfied with, we can negotiate. Dissatisfied? Of course I was satisfied. I was like a hungry little wolf. I signed immediately. $50,000 a month. Anyone who doesn't sign is an idiot. After I signed, she split the contract into 2 copies, handed one to me, and smiled faintly. Then, happy cooperation. Mr. Chu, happy cooperation. I smiled brightly in return. She gathered the documents and waved at me. Come on, I'll take you to meet our CEO. Huh? You're not the CEO? It seemed I had guessed wrong, but not completely wrong. After all, she was still a female executive. I silently calculated what type the CEO might be. Cold iceberg type? Gentle type? Or someone who followed the older sister route? We moved from the reception room to the CEO's office. She knocked on the door. From inside came a cold voice. Come in. All right, definitely iceberg type. We pushed the door open and went in. President Shen, he's here, the agreement has been signed. I looked at the woman standing with her back to us behind the desk. Long black hair fell down her back. Just her silhouette alone gave off an extraordinary presence. The aura of a CEO, you could feel the authority without even seeing her face. The office chair slowly turned around. I watched with anticipation. You've read the contract carefully? Her cold voice rang out again. Her expression showed no emotion. I nodded respectfully. I've read it carefully. No revisions. No revisions at all. You still have a chance to regret it. No regrets. She stood up and walked toward me. I stared at her without blinking. A drop of sweat slid down my forehead, not only because of her presence, but mostly because of her appearance. It wasn't porcelain white skin. Not soft pink lips. Not a cold, refined face. On her right cheek was a burn-like scar. Judging from her features, she could have been a beauty, but as things stood, honestly, she wasn't that type. But so what? That actually made me feel more at ease. If she really were a stunning beauty, I wouldn't even know how to deal with her. I let out a breath and steadied myself. The more I looked at her, the more comfortable she seemed. She showed a hint of surprise. She didn't see any fear or discomfort in my eyes. Even if I had shown it, she probably wouldn't have been angry, it would have been natural. "Hey," she suddenly asked. "Don't tell me you have a thing for ugly people?" I almost choked on my own saliva. "My taste is very normal, boss." "Then why aren't you afraid of me?" I waved my hand and laughed. "The 50,000 salary makes up for everything. If you paid me 500,000, anything would be fine." She frowned slightly and muttered something that sounded like disgust. But the corner of her mouth curved into a faint smile. She turned around and waved her hand. "All right, go handle your onboarding procedures later. From today on, you're my assistant." "Assistant?" I frowned. Seeing that I still hadn't moved, the woman who brought me in patted my shoulder. "Mr. Chu, didn't you read the agreement carefully? One of the clauses states that you also serve as the CEO's assistant." Let me tell you, those miscellaneous contracts were so thick they could have been bound into a book. Who could possibly read all of that? I only saw 50,000 per month and signed immediately. I'm doomed. If I'd known, I would have asked for more. Huge loss. Of course I read it. I definitely read it. It's just being an assistant, right? I'll get through this first and figure it out later. If I lose this job, what am I supposed to do? Thinking about how hard it was to find a job, I slapped myself lightly. And just like that, my assistant life began. Looking at the desk beside the CEO's, I swallowed hard. Assistant Chu, this document. Chu, this needs filling. Xiao Chu, this project needs attention. I was like a spinning top, whipped non-stop, turning endlessly. One day, while I was busy with the progress of the March project, Shen Ruyan, my boss, the CEO, put down the documents in her hand and stared at me intently. That look. Over this period of time, I had felt it 8.367 times. I'd already trained myself to understand what she wanted before she even spoke. Buying coffee? Checking a project? Or simply making sure she didn't have to lift a finger? Because I deeply understood that in today's world, a job with full benefits and a 50,000 monthly salary was extremely hard to find. Shen Ruyan raised her eyebrow and said softly, "None of those. Looks like I guessed wrong. Did my unbeatable flattery skills stop working?" She pinched the bridge of her nose, then said helplessly, "My parents want me to take you home." My mouth fell open in shock. Although Shen Ruyan and I were only in a contract marriage, on the very afternoon I joined the company, she had dragged me to register for a real marriage. I had asked why we didn't just fake it. I only remembered her sighing at the time and saying that her parents had methods, and fake documents were easy to check. That made sense. Mr. and Mrs. Shen were definitely not ordinary people. Living in constant anxiety, fearing the day we'd have to face the parents. I never expected that day to actually arrive. Letting out a breath, I stood up and flicked my hand. "No problem, boss. Even if it's climbing a mountain of blades or diving into a sea of fire. As your subordinate, I'll give it my all without hesitation." The corner of her mouth twitched. She looked at me, completely speechless. "It's not that serious." I slowly drove toward the place Shen Ruyan mentioned. Normally, she lived in a villa near the company that she had bought herself. This was my first time going to my in-laws' house, and I was even more nervous. After all, I was a fake. "Hey, aren't you driving a bit too slowly?" Shen Ruyan sat in the backseat, staring out the window. A public bicycle leisurely passed us, And the rider even threw us a provocative smile. I swallowed and said to Shen Rian, "Boss, safety comes first." She looked at me strangely. "Don't tell me you're nervous?" The moment she finished speaking, I immediately retorted, "Boss, even if you're the boss, I won't let you insult me. This is called good traffic safety awareness." Shen Rian fell silent and continued looking out the window. "But there is a minimum speed. You should drive a bit faster. After all, it's a request from your boss." I also realized that I really was driving a little too slowly. And the most annoying part was that the guy on the public bike deliberately turned around again and overtook us once more. Smug as ever. I couldn't take it anymore. My gaze sharpened, and I was about to step on the gas. Because it looked like he was about to pull the same stunt again. Just as I was about to speed up, there was a loud bang from outside. I glanced over. The man who had just smugly overtaken us had crashed. Both he and the bike were flung aside, stuck awkwardly against the guardrail. The guardrail had hit a sensitive spot, and the bike's front wheel was twisted, lying pitifully to the side. Looking closer, I saw a street light pole ahead. Witnessing this, I deliberately drove past him slowly and gave him a faint smile. Our eyes met perfectly. He stared at me as I smiled and drove by, and his face instantly flushed red with embarrassment. "Ha ha ha. Serves you right for daring to overtake me." I happily continued driving forward, my mood extremely good. Shen Rian, sitting in the back, muttered something softly. But through the rearview mirror, I also saw the corner of her lips curve upward slightly. "So, what do your parents like?" I stared nervously at the road ahead. Shen Rian replied casually. "My parents? My dad likes antiques, authentic or fake. He can tell at a glance. My mom likes." She went on listing things carefully. But I didn't hear a single word clearly. My mind got stuck on good at identifying fakes. I wondered if later on, he'd personally identify the fake product standing right in front of him, me. After she finished speaking, I asked, "Then should I go buy some gifts? It wouldn't be appropriate to show up empty-handed for the first visit." Unexpectedly, Shen Rian shook her head. "I've already prepared everything. It's in the trunk." As expected of a boss, so thorough. I nodded and flattered her a bit, though inwardly I wondered when she'd bought them. We soon arrived at Mr. Shen and Mrs. Shen's home. Before the car had fully stopped, I saw a middle-aged couple waiting at the entrance. The moment we parked and got out, they enthusiastically came over and surrounded me. "This must be Xiao Chu, right? Such a fine young man." These two had to be Shen Rian's parents. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I glanced at Shen Rian, but she didn't even look my way. "This boss of mine, seriously?" I let out a breath. Looks like I had to rely on myself. "Hello, Uncle and Auntie. Sorry I'm only visiting now. The company has been quite busy lately." With a smile, I started chatting with Mr. Shen and Mrs. Shen. They didn't have the kind of arrogance often seen in wealthy elders on TV dramas. Instead, they seemed very kind. Especially Mrs. Shen, she grabbed my hand and patted it gently. "And you're still calling us Uncle and Auntie? I've heard everything from Rian. You two are already married. So what should you call us now?" She looked at me expectantly, smiling with squinted eyes. I opened my mouth and glanced at Shen Rian again. She nodded slightly. So I smiled and said, "Mom, Dad." The two of them immediately smiled even brighter. I was pulled into the house. Meanwhile, Shen Rian was completely ignored and quietly went to the trunk to carry the gifts. How could that be allowed? As an employee, how could I let the boss do manual labor? What if she settled accounts with me later? After calming the two elders, I quickly ran out and took the gifts from Shen Rian's hands. "Mom, Dad, these are from Rian. She knows your health hasn't been great. These are good for the stomach." I explained everything in detail. Sincerely. The two of them accepted the gifts and looked happily at us. You two are so thoughtful. Smiling, they led us to sit on the sofa. As we chatted, Mrs. Shen soon pulled out a family photo album. Look, this is Ruyan when she was 3 years old. Running around naked, so adorable. And this is her crying in kindergarten because she didn't want to go to school. Look at that runny nose. She held the album with a nostalgic expression. Mom, what are you doing? Shen Ruyan reached out to snatch it. Her face slightly flushed, but Mrs. Shen dodged. What's wrong with letting her husband see? Don't you two see everything already on normal days? Mrs. Shen shouted, then suddenly shot me a glance. I immediately pulled back my curious gaze, recalling the photo I'd just seen. Oh, she really was a cute little kid. Mrs. Shen slipped past Shen Ruyan and brought the album closer to me, showing me many old photos. Watching Shen Ruyan grow up, her appearance becoming more and more beautiful. And then comparing that to how she looked now. I couldn't help feeling how unpredictable life was. After all, no one is completely indifferent to their appearance. When we occasionally went out, Shen Ruyan would wear a mask and a hat. Because even if you don't care yourself, the unusual looks from others are unavoidable. While flipping through, I noticed that in the later photos, a short-haired young man appeared next to Shen Ruyan. He was handsome but slightly feminine, wearing a mask and striking cool poses with her. This is, I asked softly. Mrs. Shen glanced at Shen Ruyan, then smiled faintly. That's her best friend, her closest friend. I understood. Nowadays, girls can have male best friends. And in every web novel, there's always a Bai Yuguang that the female CEO can't forget. I wondered if he was one. When it was time to prepare dinner, wasn't this my moment to shine? If Shen Ruyan didn't raise my salary after this, I'd have nothing to say. Mom, Dad, you should rest, let me show you my cooking. As I spoke, I gently pushed Mrs. Shen toward the sofa. Oh, how can you do it alone? Let me help. It's fine, really, I can handle it myself. I pushed her down. Seeing she couldn't change my mind, Mrs. Shen looked at Shen Ruyan, who was scrolling on her phone on the opposite sofa. Ruyan, go help Xiao Chu. Shen Ruyan immediately widened her eyes at me. And then got lightly tapped on the head by Mrs. Shen. What, you want to intimidate your husband right in front of me? Hurry up. Helpless, Shen Ruyan could only reluctantly follow me into the kitchen. Seeing her clumsy movements there, my head hurt. This was really turning the world upside down, making the boss help me cook. Boss. She shot me a glare and glanced outside. I immediately corrected myself. Wife, then you can help me wash the vegetables and boil water. Unexpectedly, Shen Ruyan snorted coldly. Are you looking down on me? That's really annoying. I laughed. Not at all, these steps are extremely important. If no one washes the vegetables or boils the water, I can't cook well either. She fell silent for a moment. I thought she had accepted it. But then she looked up at me and said, Teach me. I was shocked. You want to learn, boss? You really don't have to. I want to learn. I helplessly began teaching her step by step. All right, let's start with cutting vegetables. I demonstrated once, but when she tried, she still couldn't do it. Sure enough, everyone has their own strengths. After several attempts, she grew frustrated because she couldn't cut as neatly as I did. I had no choice but to hold her hands and guide her. That was the CEO, competitive to the core. Well then, excuse me, boss. I wrapped my arms around her from behind and held her hands. Wasn't this a bit too intimate? A faint shampoo scent drifted into my nose. I shook my head internally. Focus. All right, let's begin. Maybe it was because hands-on teaching worked well, but this time she improved quickly. Together, we successfully finished cooking the meal. Haha, Finally, in this lifetime, I finally get to eat food cooked by my daughter. Haven't I cooked for you before? You dare call that cooking? Mr. Shen and Mrs. Shen laughed heartily, while Shen Ruyan lowered her head gloomily. The atmosphere at the table felt very good to me. After eating, we chatted for a bit more. Because there was work at the company, we prepared to leave. Come back often. Mrs. Shen called out from the doorway. Yes, if I have time, I'll come back right away. I nodded and told them to go back inside. There was a lot going on at the company. This trip back was for handling a major project. On the drive home, the car was unusually quiet. I couldn't help but recall what had just happened at Shen Ruyan's parents' house. Based on my many years of experience reading short stories, I came to a bold yet reasonable conclusion. The young man in those photos was most likely Shen Ruyan's Bai Yuguang, the white moonlight in her heart. For some unknown reason, he had already left. As for my current marriage with Shen Ruyan, it was probably something her parents had pushed for. I was just a blind cat stumbling upon a fried fish, somehow chosen to play the role of a fake husband. Maybe it was because of my good looks? Who knows? I smiled faintly and glanced at Shen Ruyan through the rearview mirror. She was resting her chin on her hand, gazing out the window with her eyes half closed. Boss. Shen Ruyan lazily lifted her eyes, looking slightly sleepy. What is it? I lowered my voice and smiled. Well, I saw some photos of you from the past today. Honestly, you've been outstanding since you were little. Stop flattering me, just say what you want to say. Her voice sounded soft and drowsy, but her words cut straight to the point. She never wasted breath on nonsense. I swallowed and chuckled awkwardly. Well, the person standing next to you in those photos, he seemed quite remarkable. You must have liked him a lot. He was very important to you, right? She responded softly. I looked again through the rearview mirror. She had already leaned back against the seat and fallen asleep. I continued driving quietly, but inside my heart, fireworks were exploding non-stop. Kid, I really wasn't wrong. So what's the next step? I had already seen through everything. Damn, novels really are drawn from real life, and they don't even capture 1% of how dramatic reality can be. Work at the company was intense. When I first started, I hadn't fully adapted yet. After all, I didn't have much experience. But fortunately, Shen Ruyan wasn't overly harsh. She gave me opportunities to learn. At the very least, this wasn't the kind of job where you worked while also paying tuition. Like under my previous advisor. Every time I looked at the salary transferred into my account each month, my motivation skyrocketed. According to my old advisor's classic theory, regardless of what I was doing, I was gaining work experience and getting paid. Turning that down would be a waste. And to be fair, Shen Ruyan was genuinely generous. The bonuses from recent projects nearly made my eyes spin. I felt like I learned more in 1 week here than in 3 years of graduate school combined. Back then, my advisor and supervisor were textbook examples of exploitative landlords, squeezing students dry like cattle, determined to extract every last bit of value. In the meeting later, explain this project in detail to everyone. Shen Ruyan looked at me and signaled that I needed to perform well. I organized the materials, double-checked the data and content, making sure there would be no mistakes. Before long, the meeting began. Sitting in the conference room were the heads of each department. I took a deep breath and began presenting the project on the screen. The meeting went very smoothly. My proposal was approved. You did very well just now. Shen Ruyan leaned back in her office chair and rubbed between her brows. Clearly satisfied. I smiled politely. That's thanks to your excellent leadership. She glanced at me, then suddenly frowned. Don't you have any clothes? I lowered my head and looked at myself. Clean and neat, of course I did. Then why have you worn the same outfit twice this week? She looked genuinely surprised. I sighed inwardly. Rich people really lived in a different world, new outfits every day. No repeats. I smiled helplessly. I don't really care much about clothes. This weekend, come shopping with me. A busy work week passed quickly. Once I settled into the rhythm, my work became much smoother. On the weekend, I woke up early and prepared breakfast. Shen Ruyan came out of her room looking relaxed. When she saw me, she paused, slightly surprised. Good morning. Good morning, boss. I greeted her enthusiastically. She froze for a second before nodding lightly. Breakfast is ready. You can eat after washing up. Hey, this was my strategy to gain favor. If the boss ate well, she'd be in a good mood, and a good mood meant a higher salary. Right? But suddenly, I hesitated. Something wasn't right. In all those web novels, contract husbands who cooked like this never won the CEO's affection. In fact, they usually annoyed her even more. This was a serious mistake. But I couldn't just dump all the food into the trash right in front of her. Especially since Shen Ruyan was staring at it. Music. I needed to change the subject, fast. Boss, you look especially beautiful today. It feels like the scar on your face has faded a bit. The moment I said it, I wanted to slap myself. What kind of nonsense was I talking about? I hurriedly looked up and tried to explain. I didn't mean it like that. Bang. The door to the master bedroom slammed shut. What now? Had I made her angry? Was I going to get fired? I panicked and even considered checking the contract to see if there was severance pay. After a while, Shen Ruyan came out again, fully dressed and made up. She stayed in the master bedroom, I used the guest room. Both rooms had private bathrooms, so there were no awkward accidents like accidentally opening the door on someone showering. Thank you, she said softly, then sat down at the table and began eating. All my worries vanished instantly. If possible, please raise my salary. After breakfast, we cleaned up and got ready to go out. Shen Ruyan put on a mask and a hat, covering herself carefully. The mall nearby wasn't far, we arrived quickly. We walked around for a while. Try this one. She pointed to a casual outfit. I touched the fabric, simple design, but comfortable and nice. Then I glanced at the price tag. My heart skipped a beat. Damn it, this thing was that expensive? I slowly put it back, smoothed out the wrinkles, and pulled my hand away. Boss, maybe we should check the street shops instead. Try it, I'll pay. Her tone left no room for argument. I snorted lightly. A real man shouldn't live off someone else. Then I smiled. All right, boss. I went into the fitting room. When I came out, it suits you. She rested her chin on her hand and examined me carefully. Your taste is excellent, I added smoothly. She frowned. Change into another one. Huh? Isn't this one okay? She handed me another outfit. I sighed and went back in. Again, she nodded approvingly. This repeated for over an hour. I was exhausted. This one's good. She nodded. Finally, I relaxed. Then we'll take this one. She turned to the clerk. Wrap everything up. I stared in disbelief as she bought all the outfits I had tried on. So generous. I followed behind happily, carrying the bags. Then she stopped in front of a suit shop. She turned and looked me over carefully. Go in. Soon, the tailor was measuring me with a tape. The tailor smiled at Shen Ruyan. Miss, this gentleman has one of the best proportions I've ever seen. I froze, then decided not to explain. After all, I was her husband, fake or not. If I said she was just my boss buying clothes for an employee, who would believe that? I glanced at Shen Ruyan. I wasn't sure if it was my imagination, but there seemed to be a trace of amusement in her eyes. Definitely my imagination. Her eyes were beautiful, she'd probably look affectionate even at a dog. After choosing the style and fabric, we left. The suit would take time to finish. We were both tired, so we sat down at a cafe and ordered dessert and coffee. We listened to music quietly. After a while, I really needed the restroom. Since the cafe didn't have one, I went to the public restroom in the mall. After signaling to Shen Rian, I hurried off, took a few turns, and finally found it. Once finished, I felt completely relieved. Now I needed to get back quickly. Leaving the boss alone for too long wouldn't be good. But the moment I hurried back, my expression darkened instantly. Standing next to Shen Rian were two well-dressed men. Their clothes were flashy, their hair overly styled, exaggerated to the point of being ridiculous. At first glance, they looked barely presentable. Are they asking for directions, or harassing her? I rushed over, but in the very next second, their words ignited my anger completely. Well damn, from the back I thought she was some kind of stunning beauty. But looking at her face up close, wow, that scared the hell out of me. With a face like that, shouldn't you stay home instead of coming out in public? Seriously. Exactly, it's disgusting. She must have done something shady to end up looking like this. Serves her right. The two of them laughed loudly, clearly emboldened, and even looked like they were about to get handsy. Damn it. Even if I'm just a fake husband, I'm still her husband. And they dared to humiliate my wife right in front of me? I couldn't take it anymore. Get lost. I kicked forward without hesitation. One of them was knocked straight to the ground. I grabbed the other by the collar and landed several heavy punches in quick succession. What she looks like is none of your business. You don't get to judge her. Take a good look at your own faces first. With appearances like yours, just stepping outside should earn complaints for visual pollution, and you still have the nerve to insult others? Go home and look in a mirror. When your mothers gave birth to you, did they throw you away and raise the placenta instead? I've seen toilets in restrooms, but never ones that talk like this. Spit. I turned toward the sound. Shen Rian was wiping her mouth. I let out a breath, ready to continue teaching those idiots a lesson, but they had already fled without a trace. Gone just like that. Didn't they usually fight back and exchange insults in these kinds of situations? Whatever, running away was fine. I glanced around the cafe. Fortunately, only the two of us were left, but the staff looked oddly calm. I rubbed my chin. People in big cities really had seen it all. I turned back to Shen Rian. She had already put her mask back on. A surge of anger rose in my chest, not toward her, but toward people who casually degrade others for their appearance. After all, who doesn't want to look good? Is anyone choosing to be hurt or scarred? Some things aren't even within a person's control. Anyone who uses that as a weapon to humiliate others doesn't deserve to be called human. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Ignoring the surprise in Shen Rian's eyes, I grabbed her hand and pulled her outside. What are you doing? Just follow me. She looked confused but let herself be pulled along. We stopped in front of a women's clothing store. I led her inside, placed both hands on her shoulders, looked straight into her eyes, and spoke seriously. Don't listen to what those people said. You are who you are. That scar doesn't define anything. Eat well, dress well. To me, you're the most beautiful person there is. I poured out everything in one breath. Shen Rian stared at me blankly, then her eyes narrowed slightly, carrying a hint of amusement. I really don't care, she said calmly. People like that can't affect me. Good. I handed her several outfits I had already picked out. Shen Rian usually wore cool-toned clothes. I had never seen her in warm colors, let alone a dress. Probably because of the scar. Go try them on. She blinked at the clothes in her hands, hesitating. Before she could refuse, a sales assistant appeared beside us, smiling gently. I think these will suit you very well, miss. This gentleman has excellent taste. Shen Rian blinked again. I didn't give her time to think. I pushed her straight into the fitting room. She couldn't overpower me, so she had no choice but to comply. I stayed outside, listening to the assistant's recommendations while picking out more clothes. After a while. Does this look strange on me? Shen Ruyan stepped out, tugging at the hem of her dress, looking a little embarrassed. I froze. It was perfect. The usual icy, aloof CEO was now wearing a soft, lovely dress. The contrast was incredible. Yeah, it looks amazing. I gave her a thumbs up without hesitation. Really? She looked doubtful. I nodded vigorously. Of course, if you don't believe me, ask her. The sales assistant smiled and nodded as well. Yes, it truly suits you. Shen Ruyan looked at herself in the mirror. I heard her let out a soft sigh of relief. All right, let's take this one, let's go. Nope. I picked up several more outfits. Grinning. Absolutely not for my personal enjoyment. Definitely not. She looked slightly overwhelmed. After a while, I carried bags upon bags and pulled her outside. This time, I paid for everything. How could I let the boss pay? Chu Yang, where are we going now? She asked, confused. I turned and smiled at her. Just follow me. Then I stopped. Ah, this is it. I looked up at the sign and smiled. Shen Ruyan studied the place quietly and followed me inside without a word. I found a busy young woman inside and discussed things with her in detail. This will be a lot of trouble for you. She nodded, then smiled at Shen Ruyan. Leave it to me. She pulled Shen Ruyan, who was still confused, into a chair. Removed her mask, and examined her closely. A beauty indeed, but this area here. Shen Ruyan held her hand and smiled. The girl understood, smiled brightly, picked up her brushes and tools, and looked at Shen Ruyan in the mirror. All right, let's begin. I sat nearby, watching her careful work slowly take shape. After some time. All done. Perfect. She spoke softly. I looked at Shen Ruyan's face. Light blue glitter shimmered faintly on her cheek. The makeup was delicate, similar to styles seen with traditional outfits, ornamental patterns near the corners of her eyes. It didn't look forced at all. Rather than hiding the scar, it transformed it into a decorative highlight. It's beautiful. I couldn't help saying it. Shen Ruyan looked slightly shy but thanked her quietly. I even dragged her to take a few photos afterward. Moments like this deserved to be preserved. That night, I lay on my bed, satisfied, and closed my eyes. Then suddenly, I jolted awake. Was I too reckless today? What if I got fired tomorrow for overstepping? I spent the night uneasy. Good morning, boss. When Shen Ruyan came out the next morning, I greeted her nervously. She nodded calmly. Seeing no strange reaction, I finally relaxed. That was close. Yesterday really was too much. Time to work. Days passed. Work remained busy, but I became more capable with each day. Chu hasn't left yet? I went to the break room to make coffee and greeted a colleague. There's still work to do. How about staying to help me? They laughed. I'm heading out. You should go home too, it's almost 2 a.m. They left immediately. I checked the time. 1:48 a.m. That was late. I stretched, picked up the coffee, and walked toward Shen Ruyan's office. Boss, I'm coming in. After knocking, I gently pushed the door open. Boss, your coffee. She was bent over, her face twisted in pain. I rushed over. She was clutching her stomach. It was almost certainly her stomach condition acting up again. I had seen this several times before. Have you taken your medicine? She frowned and looked at me hazily. I did, but it's not helping much. Her voice was weak. I didn't hesitate. Excuse me. I picked her up directly. She gasped softly in surprise. This is more important. We're going to the hospital. I ran toward the parking lot, then remembered the car was still in repair. I tried calling a ride, but none were available. I checked the map, exhaled sharply, and set her down gently. Boss, hang in there. I crouched down, signaling for her to get on my back, but she was already semi-conscious. After some effort, I managed to carry her. Thankfully, the hospital wasn't far. After about 10 minutes, we arrived. The diagnosis was acute gastritis. A severe case. If it progressed further, it could lead to perforation. Looking at Shen Rian lying on the hospital bed, receiving an IV, her face pale, I could only sigh. This iron-willed woman only knew work. I had told her countless times to eat properly, she never listened. Irregular meals, careless habits. Now she was paying the price. I stayed quietly by her side, staring at the dim yellow light outside the window, lost in thought. Gradually, my consciousness faded. At some point, I fell asleep right there beside her hospital bed. It wasn't until I felt the urge to pee that I finally woke up. My throat and the back of my neck ached dully. The moment I opened my eyes, I met another pair of eyes staring straight at me, someone propped up on the bed, watching me sleep. "You're awake?" Shen Rian said. Her eyes were bright, her complexion was still a little pale, but she looked much better than before. I nodded and walked over to lie down on the small folding bed beside hers. We lay there quietly like that. The dim yellow light outside the window spilled into the room. Everything was extremely still, broken only occasionally by the sound of medical staff rushing past outside to tend to other patients. "Thank you." Shen Rian suddenly spoke softly. I turned my head to look at her. She was lying on the hospital bed, gazing blankly at the ceiling. I didn't know if it was the moonlight or something else, but her face seemed to be dusted with a faint silvery glow. Even the scars on her face looked much lighter. "It's nothing," I said. I shifted and pulled my jacket over myself, mainly to cover my belly button. After that, silence fell between us again. "Well." At the same time, both Shen Rian and I spoke. "You go first," she said softly. I felt a little embarrassed. I'll go to the restroom first." After saying that, I didn't wait for her response and bolted straight toward the bathroom. "Boss, it's time to eat." I carried a lunchbox into the office. Shen Rian was still reviewing documents and replied casually, "You eat first, just leave it there for me." After she said that, she noticed I wasn't moving at all. She looked up and saw me still standing there, holding the lunchbox, grinning at her. "All right, I'll eat," she said helplessly. I immediately perked up and began introducing the dishes enthusiastically. "Boss, look, this is sweet and sour ribs, chicken stewed with mushrooms, and there's also shrimp in oil." Shen Rian looked at the pile of food and sighed. "I'm not a pig, how am I supposed to finish all this?" "The more, the better, boss, just a little of each, there's not that much. Really." She lowered her head and started eating. After a while, as I was cleaning up the lunchboxes, I heard the sound of a phone notification. "Alipay has received 1 yuan. I froze and looked at Shen Rian. She continued flipping through documents and said calmly, "That's your cooking fee." I immediately walked up to her, full of affection. "Boss, your health is the company's greatest treasure. Doing these things is what I should do. But since you've already said so, I'll gratefully accept." I happily took the money. After all, since the boss had spoken, how could I embarrass her by refusing? "Then please keep working, boss. I'll take my leave." I gently closed the door and left the office, completely unaware that inside the room, the corner of Shen Rian's lips curved slightly into a subtle, meaningful smile. Only I was immersed in the joy of making money. I started calculating whether there were any other ways to squeeze more money out of my boss. I took out my small notebook and crossed off the meal service item. What other items are left? A money-loving person like me fell into deep thought again. Of course, all these services had to be done properly, no cutting corners. Shen Rian and I went to the company's factory to inspect the production situation. The person in charge beside us smiled enthusiastically. "Of course, we strictly control everything. There's absolutely no chance of counterfeit products." Shen Rian nodded. All right then, everyone, go back to work. We'll take a look around ourselves. The person in charge stiffened slightly, then smiled and left. You can't completely trust what they say, Shen Rian said, leading me around. When we reached a storage warehouse, we pushed the door open to check the goods inside. But at that exact moment, everything around us suddenly went dark. Clack. The warehouse door slammed shut. What's going on? I rushed over and yanked at the door with all my strength. But it wouldn't budge. It had clearly been locked from the outside. I frowned and looked at Shen Rian. Her expression had turned extremely serious. There's no way this was accidental. We greeted the staff when we arrived. This was deliberate. And there's no signal on our phones either. I checked my phone, sure enough. Not a single bar. Both of us immediately realized something was very wrong. And sure enough, the next moment, smoke began seeping in through the cracks under the door. Those bastards, they're really going all out. I immediately pulled Shen Rian back and searched for anything that could help protect us from the fire. Since they'd gone this far, the fire safety systems had definitely been disabled. Just as expected, because the goods in the warehouse were highly flammable. The fire spread rapidly, but the smoke alarm never sounded. Flames roared around us, smoke billowing everywhere. Shen Rian and I had no choice but to cover our mouths and noses with our clothes. Yet we were still choking badly. Hearing me cough violently, Shen Rian frowned and said, "There's no other way, turn your back. Cover your ears too, remember, turn your back." I turned around to observe our surroundings. A moment later, I heard some rustling behind me. All right, you can turn back now. I didn't know if it was the firelight, but Shen Rian's face was slightly flushed. She handed me a piece of cloth, it seemed to have been soaked. Use this to cover your mouth and nose. Then we'll find a way out. I took it blankly, sniffed it, then looked up. Boss, actually, I've already found an escape route. I pointed toward a window not too far away. It was a bit high, but it was worth a try. Ignoring the awkward look on Shen Rian's face, I stacked several crates together and climbed up. After a lot of effort, I finally got up there. I pushed with all my strength, but the window didn't move at all. Turns out this one was locked shut too. Shen Rian and I collapsed onto the ground. Gradually, I noticed that as the fire intensified, something about Shen Rian's condition seemed off. She curled up into a ball, muttering to herself non-stop, clearly no longer fully conscious. "Boss, boss!" I shouted loudly, but her condition only worsened. I looked at the large door in front of us and decided to take a gamble. Thanks to my experience last time, carrying Shen Rian on my back was already second nature. Wooden and steel frames overhead kept crashing down. Extremely dangerous. I tied the wet cloth over my mouth and nose, braced myself, pushed through the flames, enduring the searing pain, and finally reached the main door. The iron door was glowing red hot. I was about to look for something to ram it open when, in the very next second, the door swung open by itself. "President Shen, Assistant Chu, are you two all right?" I saw the intellectual-looking woman who had recruited me, staring at me anxiously. An angel. The moment I saw her, my strength gave out completely, and I collapsed. When I woke up, I was already lying in a hospital bed. "You're awake?" The intellectual woman walked in just then. I tried to sit up to ask about things, but she answered first. "The president is fine, don't worry." After chatting with her for a bit, I learned that the fire had been caused by someone deliberately trying to harm us, and it was the continuation of grudges from more than 10 years ago. That complicated? I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling in a daze. This fire, it felt like I'd experienced something similar before. After thinking for a while, I fell into a deep sleep again. I jolted awake from a nightmare. I had just had a really bad dream. I checked the clock, it was already past 3 a.m. More than 3 months had passed since the fire, After that, both Shen Rian and I recovered quickly. Thankfully, neither of us had been seriously injured. Life gradually returned to normal. We continued working as usual. Feeling a little thirsty, I went to get some water. As I passed by, I noticed that the light in Shen Rian's room was still on. I could faintly hear voices inside. I took a sip of water. Lately, Shen Rian had been coming home later and later. I subtly asked Mother Shen whether the person in the photo was about to return. Mother Shen happily said yes, and even sighed that the child had really suffered, having been separated from Shen Rian for so long. I understood immediately. She was talking about me. I then asked the caretaker who had looked after Shen Rian since childhood whether Shen Rian had a white moonlight. The aunt laughed excitedly and said, "How did you know?" She went on to say that this white moonlight had always been inseparable from Shen Rian. The two of them slept together as kids and grew up together. That white moonlight even loved licking Shen Rian. It was only because he went abroad that they were separated. Looks like that's definitely it. As expected of me, my guesses never miss. But that's fine. The 3-year contract would be expiring in a few days anyway. After 3 years of exhaustion and near-death experiences, it was time to rest properly. After all, money is something you'll never finish earning anyway. I finished the glass of water in one go and went back into the bedroom. A plan already forming in my mind. So, on the day Shen Rian went to the airport to pick up her so-called white moonlight, I placed my resignation letter neatly on her desk. Based on my many years of experience, running into someone's white moonlight was never a good thing. My current position was extremely awkward. If I ended up being provoked by this white moonlight in person, it would be nothing but a headache. Better to run early than to get caught in trouble. So I took the plane ticket I'd booked long ago, grabbed my luggage, and happily flew overseas. Traveling the world had always been my dream. Back then I just didn't have the money. Now that the emperor was far away and the sky was high, I'd flown this far. How could that white moonlight possibly slap me in the face now? And just like that, I wandered freely. From the Louvre Museum to Maldives. From Mount Fuji to Venice. Then onward to a national park at the end of a mountain range. After making a full circle, I returned again. Half a year had passed. I went back to the holy land of otaku, Akihabara, to experience maid cafes and bought several more figure models. I had to admit, Akihabara was genuinely fun. Spending the entire day there was exhausting. After finishing a recommended bowl of ramen, I returned to the inn and went to sleep. In a hazy half-dream, I suddenly felt a pair of hands moving over my body. The sensation was strange and unsettling. Just then, a nightmare jolted me awake. I opened my eyes in terror. But my body was held tightly, unable to move. I turned my head and realized this wasn't the inn I'd rented. Had I been kidnapped? Japanese Yakuza? I started to panic, trying to see clearly, when the hands moved upward along my chest. Only then did I notice the chill against my skin. At some point, my clothes were gone. Well, miss. I urgently need to communicate. I stopped mid-sentence, realizing she might not understand Chinese. I was about to switch to Japanese when the other party suddenly moved closer. Something soft and slightly damp brushed against my chest. I followed the direction and nearly lost my soul. Boss? The woman lying on top of me looked incredibly familiar. When I looked closer, I realized it was Shen Rian. Her scar was gone. And she was wearing makeup in exactly the style I'd once taken her to try. She was even wearing the light blue dress I'd bought for her. Seeing me stare, Shen Rian smiled meaningfully. "You're awake?" She pinched me hard. I gasped in shock and hurriedly asked, "Boss, why am I here?" Instead of answering, she leaned in and sealed my lips. She pressed close, carrying a faint sweetness, like candy. After a long while, she finally pulled back. I was panting, staring at her. Shen Rian's face was flushed as well. When she noticed me looking at her, she suddenly shot me an annoyed glare. Why did you run? Why did you change your phone number? A barrage of questions came crashing down. I smiled bitterly. Wasn't our contract over? I was making room for you in your White Moonlight. The moment I finished speaking, my lips were sealed again. After a while, Shen Rian spoke breathlessly, her eyes glistening. White Moonlight? What nonsense are you talking about? She looked like she wanted to bite me. As I struggled slightly, I suddenly heard a click. It felt like I'd triggered some kind of switch. The surroundings lit up instantly. What I saw next left me utterly stunned. All four walls were covered with photos of me, from when I was 13 years old until recently. From sneaking out of the 18-plus book section, to eating, studying, sleeping, showering, playing basketball with classmates. Everything. If I ever wrote an autobiography, these photos would be priceless material. This was way too creepy. Why were there even photos of me going to the bathroom? I was horrified. Shen Rian stared at the photos with heart-shaped eyes, then looked back at me like a hungry predator. She licked her lips. I felt like I'd seen something I really shouldn't have. Just then. Bang. The door was pushed open. Rian, I brought your White Moonlight back for you. A short-haired woman walked in, holding a small white dog. She froze when she saw me lying on the bed and Shen Rian on top of me. Sorry to interrupt, you two carry on. She shut the door immediately. That woman's eyebrows and eyes looked oddly familiar. As I was thinking, a sharp jolt shot through my body, not emotionally, but physically. Shen Rian was holding a small electric stun device and zapped me. It wasn't strong, but it was more than enough to wake me completely. That woman just now, isn't she the one in the photos? And that dog, its name is White Moonlight. I felt my brain had truly turned into pig brains. Then I got zapped again. Is she very pretty? Shen Rian asked coldly. You like looking at her that much? She stared at me with unmistakable jealousy. Haha, no, of course not. That's good. She hugged me tightly, as if reminiscing. Maybe you don't remember, but we've known each other for a very long time. When we were 13, just like this fire, you saved me from a warehouse that was about to burn down. She gently traced the old scar on my chest and spoke sweetly. From that moment on, I think I fell in love with you. But that kind of love was a little wrong. I couldn't wait anymore. I wanted to merge with you completely. To bind you to my side. But Xiao Meng stopped me. She told me that loving someone isn't imprisoning them, but letting them grow up healthy. So I waited and waited. Every night, I used your photos to comfort myself. I really am a shameless woman. She turned her face away shyly. Then Xiao Meng went abroad. No one could stop me anymore. But if I scared you and you ran away, that wouldn't be good. So I had someone bring you into the company as my assistant. That way, we could slowly cultivate our feelings, right? Her eyes gleamed faintly pink. But why did you still run? Were you worried about the person in the photos? She chuckled softly. That was the girl who just came in. She's my childhood best friend. I swallowed hard. Her smile didn't fade, instead. She licked her lips again. Or, are you jealous of my White Moonlight? Seeing my expression, she laughed. This is all Xiao Meng's fault. She insisted my dog, Xiao Bai, needed a proper surname too. And named it White Moonlight. I think just calling it Xiao Bai would have been fine. That misunderstanding made my husband get the wrong idea. But I didn't explain it clearly either. Still, husband, you're also responsible. You ran off without asking anything. Do you know how hard I searched for you? Her eyes glowed intensely, her heart practically pulsing. Let me punish you properly. Then. She leaned down. Don't. 3 hours later, I began contemplating philosophy. I had been thoroughly overwhelmed. I was no longer worth anything. Shen Rian hugged me and licked her lips. Since it's come to this, let me compensate you. I'll marry you. She looked somewhere on my body, her eyes lighting up again. One more time. A month later, the weather was beautiful. I watched Shen Rian in a wedding dress, arm in arm with another man at the ceremony, tears streaming down my face. How did things turn out like this in just 1 month? Life really is unpredictable. Just as I was sighing, Shen Rian suddenly turned around, covered her mouth, and shouted, "Hey, groom standing there spacing out, aren't you coming over yet?" I chuckled and immediately stepped forward, taking Shen Rian's arm from her father. Her father's eyes were red as he said, "I'm entrusting Rian to you." I nodded solemnly. "Don't worry, Dad, I'll take good care of Rian." He nodded again and again, tears falling. Shen Rian and I walked forward together, gazing deeply at each other, exchanging rings and vows. That night, Shen Rian bit my ear and whispered, "If you ever dare to run again, if I catch you, I'll bite that thing of yours clean off." I shuddered. That sentence. It haunted me for life. Until we were over 90 years old, still walking hand in hand down the street. She tried to let go shyly, but I held on tightly. "This time, it's my turn to hold on to you," I said. "Even until death, we stay together." That's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to China Story Tales, and stay tuned for more stories.